Humans are poor predictors of the future. And we are disingenuous interpreters of the past. An inscription from my high school journal, this is April the 13th, 1996, reads, "The University of Texas, student body president, Harvard Law School, practice in Houston for 5 years, practice in Mount Pleasant for 3 years, state senate, governor's mansion." Okay. And this all stemmed from one of the most dangerous questions we ask children, which is, what do you want to be when you grow up? Right? What do you want to be when you grow up? And so this is the question that my father asked. He's a Baptist minister, 43 years, preaching at the Mount Olive Baptist Church in Mount Pleasant, Texas. I'm a 5th generation East Texan. So he asked me this question, and we had just traveled to Austin 2 weeks before he posed this to me. And I remember standing in the Capitol, right? And in the rotunda and looking up at all of the portraits of the governors and thinking to myself, you know, this sounds like a sexy title. So I told him I want to be governor of Texas. He said, okay. By what age? I'm like, oh my gosh. You know, even before there were SMART goals, my dad believed in SMART goals, all right? So I picked a number that I thought was far enough into the distance that it would give me some time. I said, by age 40. Okay, I turned 44 in November. So obviously I took a wrong turn somewhere. Or if you ask my wife, I took a right turn. But that was the plan. So I get to the University of Texas. I'm student body president. I'm checking off the boxes. I apply to Harvard Law School. I don't get accepted. I don't get rejected. What's in the middle? The dreaded wait list, right? Dun, dun, dun. Okay, so let me paraphrase the letter for you. Dear Daron, we like you. Unfortunately, Daron, there are so many more humans that we like more than you. Now, Daron, in the highly unlikely event that we reach back out to you, we hope that you will say yes. But Daron, if you have any viable options for law school, we highly advise you to take advantage of them. With love, Joyce P. Curl, Dean of Admissions. Look, I'm distraught, all right? I'm walking across the 40 acres in sackcloth and ashes. The planes have been derailed, right? And this is how life works, right? We plan in linear terms, and then we look back and realize that life by design is nonlinear. My mentor, a man named Lowell Leberman, calls me up and he says, I've got a job for you. You're working in D.C. This is on a Thursday. I said, yes, sir. You're working for Joe Lieberman. I said, okay. So this is 1997. I go to the interwebs. Flights were like $43,000, right? I called him back. I said, Lowell, I can't afford a flight to D.C. He said, well, son, have you ever ridden a bus? So I jump on a Greyhound bus. I get to Union Station on a Sunday. And I don't want to be there, but it's June of 2001. I'm working on education bills. September 11th comes. So September 11th, I'm working on education bills. September the 12th, I'm working on national security bills. And I'm in a place where I don't want to be, right? I'm sure that many of you, if you surveyed your professional past, there were a lot of cul-de-sacs sprinkled throughout your resume, and you landed in places where you thought you shouldn't be or where you didn't want to be. But I got a front row seat to government and leadership at the most tumultuous time in the past 2 decades. I'm reapplying to Harvard Law School. Wait list number 2, wait list number 3. I go to the Kennedy School, wait list number 4. Finally, the 5th attempt, I get in, I'm like, all right, we're back on track. 2006 rolls around, I am a rising 3L, so it's my last summer, and a high school buddy calls me up, and he says, hey, Daron, he and I played football together at Mount Pleasant High School. He was good, I was average, and he said, look, I have to work this football camp. He was a coach at Pflugerville Conley. I've got to go to the South Carolina Steve Spurrier football camp. Let's just take a road trip. Man, I haven't seen you in a while. I said, you know what? I'd been clerking at a couple of law firms, and this sounded like a great vacation. Right? So yeah, let's go. So we jump in the car, and we get to Columbia, South Carolina. And I'm sitting in a room just like this, right? Steve Spurrier walks out the night before the camp, and he says, all right, guys, listen up. One of our coaches canceled, didn't show up. Can anyone fill in for him? Right. So I'm sitting on the back row, and I'm fiddling with my BlackBerry. You know, it's 2006. And so I'm sitting there. And I said, I was a first team all-district strong safety. Right. Friday Night Lights, state of Texas. So I raised my hand. Meanwhile, my buddy is elbowing me in the rib cage. He's like, do not get us kicked out of this camp. I said, it's okay. Coach, what's your name? Coach Roberts. All right, Coach Roberts, where do you coach? Plot thickens. Plot thickens. This is where we start lying. I said, Mount Pleasant High School, Coach. I said, Mount Pleasant High School. Excellent, excellent. You have group 6. Yes, sir. Got it. I had no clue what this man was talking about. Group 6 consisted of 60 sixth graders, none of whom had any athletic talent whatsoever. Now listen, this is the world of college camp. Some of you have kids, nieces, and nephews. Just let me give you sort of a quick primer here. If at any point you pay for one of your loved ones to attend a college camp, I hate to break it to you, but there's a 98.6% chance that that kid is not being recruited by that university, all right? You know, the 4 stars, the 5 stars, they find some way to get into the camp for free. All 60 of my kids had receipts for the camp, all right? So they couldn't play football, and hell, I couldn't coach. So the night before, I go to Academy, I buy a bucket hat, I get some sunglasses, I've got a stopwatch and a whistle. I'm watching YouTube videos of Tony Dungy and Deion Sanders and Mike Tomlin, and I'm writing down notes, okay? And I get up the next morning, I'm fired up. I've got my cones ready, I got my whistle. You know, at some point, I want to find those 60 humans, sort of like a where are they now? I'm convinced that up until that camp, they were headed on this arc of success. And then they landed in group 6 with faux Coach Roberts. Here's one thing I realized. 3 days of that camp, it was the first time in my life that I did not have to set my alarm clock to get up. For those of you keeping notes in your head or Apple Notes, wherever you register these things, notice what lights you up. Notice what lights you up. That question that I mentioned at the beginning, what do you want to be when you grow up? We should rephrase that for who do you want to be when you grow up? Because when we use the word what, it elicits a terminal response, right? So now, and my wife and I have 5 kids from ages 5 to 12. So say your prayers or your rosaries or whatever you do. From 5 to 12. And so we began our parenting excursion with these young people, asking them this question. And immediately I would see them starting to sort of gauge, you know, what would sound good for dad? Right? What would sound good to mom? But when you start asking, who do you want to be? It forces you to think about the qualities. David Brooks talks about the eulogy traits versus the resume traits. Like, what are the things you want to be remembered for? Forget about the titles and the promotions. I think 2020 really taught a lot of us what the true value of those things are in our lives. But who do you want to be? I get back to Harvard Law School, fly into Logan Airport. I walk up to a payphone. So for those of you who don't know, a payphone is this machine, and you took a quarter, you put it in and dial some numbers. Mom answers, "Hey, son, how was the camp?" I said, "It was unbelievable. I want to be a football coach." Silence. "Honey, let me put your dad on the phone. Kurt, could you come here for a second?" "Son, how did it go?" I said, "Dad," listen, I ended up coaching. He goes, "You were doing what? You were just supposed to ride with Alfonso." I said, "Yeah, but someone didn't show up and I just jumped in." He goes, "You don't know how to coach?" I said, "I know. That's the best part." I said, "Dad, I got to be a coach." He said, "Okay, calm down. I have one question for you. Do you know how much debt you're in?" Right? What do parents care about? Debt. I said, "Yes." I said, Bank of America does a really great job of reminding me that 6 months from the date that I graduate from law school, they will hunt me down across the entire earth and force me to start paying back these loans. And my dad said, "Look now, hey, this is not our obligation. So we made a deal with you in high school. We would pay for undergrad, but you're on the hook for grad and law school." And I said, "Dad, I've been thinking about that." I was fortunate to get a full academic ride to UT. So by my very crude accounting, it appears that you and Mom owe me around $69,427.92 without interest. All right. So what does a Baptist minister do in a moment like this? "Well, son, let's pray." So he prays me. I have yet to see the check. All right? I have yet to see the check, but we had a 20-minute prayer. I wrote a letter to every NFL team asking for an internship. Does anyone know how many teams there are? How many NFL teams are there? 32. I get 31 no's. All right, Bill Belichick, no. Tony Dungy, no. Wade Phillips, no. I get one yes from a man named Herm Edwards. He calls me up. It's April the 3rd. It's 2007. The first question out of his mouth is, "Hey, son, what's wrong with you?" I say, "Excuse me, coach?" I said, "Look, I don't read my own mail, but my assistant, Catherine, put your letter on my desk with a sticky that reads, 'Not sure if something's wrong with him, but you should give him a call, Herm.'" Catherine gets the largest bouquet of flowers that 1-800-Flowers offers every year on her birthday from me because of that sticky. He says, "Look, I'm here to talk you out of coaching." He goes, "Man, just go practice law." And I said, "Coach, I worked this." He goes, "I read the letter. I know about the damn camp." All right? He said, "You do not want this life." I said, "Coach, I want to be a coach." He's all right. "Take out a pen and paper. I got an offer for you." So I scramble for my Pilot V5 Precise pen and I get it out and I'm ready to go. He goes, "All right, you're going to be a training camp intern. No pay. No benefits. 18-hour days. So I glance at this list and I'm thinking to myself, this sounds like an employment lawsuit waiting to happen, I only took one semester of it, but no pay, no benefits, 18-hour days. This was in my head. I didn't say this out loud. I said, "Coach, I'm in." All right? He said, "All right, when you graduate, as soon as you can." He goes, "Like the next day, make your way to Kansas City, Missouri." So I graduate June the 6th, 2007, walk across the stage like this, take my diploma from Elena Kagan, who was the dean at the time, exit stage, party with my parents that night. The next day I get up in my 2002 Tahoe. I head from Cambridge, Massachusetts to Kansas City, Missouri. I get there and I'm the grunt, all right? If the offensive linemen need barbecue sandwiches, I'm the guy. If the defensive linemen needed Skol, and I can tell this is a very refined crowd, so let me translate for you. This is chewing tobacco. I would go to every Exxon, Chevron, Texaco, you name it. And I would purchase as much wintergreen Skol as a U.S. citizen can legally buy in a 24-hour time span. I slept at Arrowhead for 6 months. I volunteered, and at the end of the year, we went 4-12. And there's this thing called Black Monday, which was actually just this past Monday. And this is not to be confused with Black Friday, all right, where you can get great deals on Amazon. Black Monday is when coaches get fired. And so I watched 4 coaches walk into Coach Edwards' office. They walk out with 2 things: a security guard and a dolly. They have 45 minutes to clear their belongings out of their offices and exit Arrowhead Stadium. So Catherine walks to my office. It's a converted closet. We've torn the door off the hinges. And she knocks. She says, "May I come in?" I said, "Catherine, I don't have a door." Of course. She walks in. She says, "Coach Edwards would like to see you." I said, "Oh." I said, "Am I getting fired?" She says, "I don't know." So I'm walking to his office and I'm thinking to myself, technically I can't get fired. Right? I haven't signed a single piece of paperwork in my 7-month time in Kansas City. I mean, it's like a black ops mission. If you were to Google Daron Roberts, Kansas City Chiefs, 2007, nothing would come up. In the team picture, 3rd row, 2nd from the left, you see a black dot. That's me. I had to sneak into the team picture right before they said go. And so I sit down and I said, "Coach," Catherine said, "You'd like to meet with us?" "Yeah, sit down." He said, "Daron, listen. First thing I want to tell you is I really appreciate all of your contributions." I said, "Oh, God, don't say that." Right? I'd taken enough business school classes to know that there's something called the termination sandwich. Okay. All right, the research says begin with a compliment, let them go, send them on their way with a compliment. I said, "Oh, God, I'm getting served a termination sandwich." He says, "Look, I don't know why I'm doing this." He slides this 18-page packet across the desk. He says, "That's your first NFL coaching contract." So what do you do in a moment like this? I whip out my Pilot V5 Precise pen, turn to page 18, sign it, hand it back to him. He said, "Oh, do they still teach contract law in law school?" I said, "Coach, listen, if there's one thing I know, it's when I have absolutely no leverage. There isn't a clause in this 18-page document that I'm in any position to negotiate. Let's just go." So I coached for 2 years in Kansas City, 2 years in Detroit with the Lions, 2 years in West Virginia with the Mountaineers. Last year with America's team, did we have any fans here? You just don't want to admit it in public? That's fair. The Cleveland Browns. We went 4-12. The owner, Jimmy Haslam, walks in and he says, the next day, "Guys, I appreciate all of your contributions. I'm firing all the coaches today." Meeting started at 8 o'clock, ended at 8:01. And so I go home and I'm scrambling eggs and I'm thinking about the next spot, and my son walks over. He was 4 at the time, and he said, "You eat breakfast?" So I did what any good father would do in a moment like this. I just kept scrambling and ignored the kid, right? Persistent fellow walks over. He says, "You eat breakfast?" So I turned to my wife. I said, "Look, you convinced me to put him into this private school, and I'm a public school kid. I don't know what's wrong with him, but I need a refund." I said, "What is he talking about? Do I eat breakfast?" And my wife grew up on a ranch in Kansas, Leavenworth, Kansas, never one to pull punches. She says, "Well, when was the last time that you had breakfast with Dylan?" When was the last time you had breakfast with Dylan? And as I surveyed my brain for the memories of the last 4 years, I could not locate any meal, let alone breakfast. So this is what I want to say. Look, all of you are doing incredible work. And as you look at today's roster, you think about the topics that you're going to delve into. These are weighty issues, to say the least. Inclusion and diversity and climate and sustainability and impact. What I hope you'll think about after you leave here is just one question, right? Who are you without the ball? So this is something that Herm Edwards would pose this question every single week to the entire team. It's like, look, we've got coaches and we've got players and we've got doctors, and so much of what you do is tied to what we do on Sundays. But who are you without the ball? Because when I think about 2020 and the time that, the universe forced us to get still. So many of us, for years, 2019, 2018, we had all of these resolutions about being more present. And 2020 comes along and says, screw your resolutions, we're doing this. And there were some promises, some personal promises that we made to ourselves that it didn't take long for us to break once it looked like normalcy had returned. So I want you to think about who you are without the ball and the people around you. How much do they see you? When was the last time that you called your grandparents? These are the questions that don't show up in a spreadsheet or a PowerPoint, but this is what moves the needle. And at the end of the day, stay in the deep end. Thank you.
So the year was 2006, and I was sitting on a conveyor belt that ran through Harvard Law School. And it would make frequent drop-offs at Wall Street firms across the country. And all of these firms were indistinguishable. They featured the same ampersands, the partners wore the same pinstripes, all of the documents smelled like something you would pull out of your grandmother's attic. And at the end of that summer, I got a call from a buddy of mine. We had both played high school football. Now, I know I look like a strapping young male, but as a senior back in Mount Pleasant High School, I was 5'9" and a half, 163 pounds, and that was with the protein shakes and the bananas. And my buddy was also an undersized football player, but we both loved the game. And so I go to this camp, and I'm sitting in the back of the room, and the coach comes out and says, one of our volunteer coaches has not shown up. So it's 2006, and I'm on my BlackBerry, so don't judge me, but I'm on the BlackBerry. And I look up, and I think to myself, okay. He says, do we have anyone who could fill in for this coach? I'm thinking to myself, I played football in Texas, home of Friday Night Lights, so I raised my hand, and he said, all right, coach, where are you from? I said, Mount Pleasant High School, Mount Pleasant High School. All right, what's your name? Coach Roberts. Coach Roberts, you have group 6. I had absolutely no clue what this man was talking about. Group 6 consisted of 60 sixth graders, none of whom had any athletic talent whatsoever. They couldn't pack pedal, they couldn't run forward. Even worse than that, their parents had taken them to academy, to the Nike outlet, and they had headbands and wristbands and ankle bands. They were just doing it. They were protecting the house. They were all of the things. So these kids couldn't play football. They had a coach who couldn't coach football. And for the next 72 hours, we spent most of our days together. And at the end of that experience, I recognized something that had never happened before in my life. For 3 days, I did not have to set my alarm clock to get up. Every morning I was up and I was excited to coach these young men. And the thing that really astounded me was the fact that for very brief moments around a football field, kids from the south side of Chicago, kids from the north side of Dallas, these are kids whose parents don't shop at the same types of grocery stores. They don't go to the same types of churches. They don't drive the same types of cars. But for very brief moments on a football field, socioeconomic status, and race lift away, and you have 11 men who are trying to make a play work. So I decided I wanted to be a football coach. And the first thing I did was call my mom. You don't know Gwen Roberts. Gwen Roberts, for 30 years, was an elementary school principal. And so I call and I say, Mom, I want to be a football coach. She says, oh, honey, that's so great. Do you think your law firms will let you sort of do this as a pro bono project? I said, no, Mom, I want to do this full time. She said, okay, let me put your dad on the phone. You don't know the Reverend Kurt Roberts, 38 years, minister of the Mount Olive Baptist Church. Reverend Roberts gets on the phone. He says, son, what's wrong with you? I said, well, I work this camp. He said, yeah, whatever. Let me ask you this. Do you know how much debt you're in? I did. So at the time, I had spent 5 years in Cambridge, had racked up $250,000 in debt. You mathematicians will know that this is $250,000. Pre-interest, mind you, pre-interest. I said, Dad, listen, Bank of America does a great job of reminding me every single day that from the moment Dean Elena Kagan hands me that diploma, I have 6 months of freedom. My dad said, well, you also remember our deal, and the deal was this. My parents would pay for undergrad, but I would pay for grad and law school. I said, well, technically, Dad, you kind of owe me money. I got a full ride to go to Texas, and you never paid me back, so I could use that money to pay for law school. Being the minister that he is, he said, well, let's pray, son. And so we pray. Prayer ends, they hang up the phone, and I write a letter to every team in the NFL. Okay, how many are there? How many are there? 32. I'm going to say the name of a team, and you're going to say no. You ready? Chargers. No. Bills. No. Patriots. No. Cowboys. No. Okay, it's getting bad now. Okay, listen. I get the point. I got 31 rejections. As soon as I would put a letter in the mail, a rejection letter would come the next day. From those 31 rejections, I remember taking the letters and putting them up in my apartment in the hallways, and my friends would come over and listen, these are classmates who are headed to the White House and to clerk for SpeakInc. And they said, Daron, what in the heck is wrong with you? And finally, I got the one yes that I needed. So Herm Edwards, head football coach of the Kansas City Chiefs, calls and he says, I need to speak with Daron Roberts. I'm not convinced it's Herm Edwards, mind you, okay? So I said, yes, son, what's wrong with you? I said, well, nothing that's been documented. Here's the deal, I work this campus. I said, yeah, whatever. Listen, I don't even open my own mail, but my assistant got your letter. She put it on my desk. I don't know why you want to do this, but take out a pen. So I take out my Pilot V5 Precise pen. And he says, write this down. Training camp intern. Training camp intern. No pay. No pay. No benefits. So at this point, I'm wondering, why do I need the pen, right? No pay, no benefits, 18-hour days. He says, son, I need an answer right now. It took me 2 seconds to say, yes, I'm in. So after graduation, I drove my 2002 Tahoe from Cambridge, Massachusetts to Kansas City, Missouri. And for all intents and purposes, I was the grunt. So if the offensive lineman needed 35 barbecue sandwiches, I was their guy. If the defensive lineman needed 2 cases of Skoal, and I know a lot of you, you're refined people. Skoal, this is chewing tobacco, okay? I was the guy who went from 7-Eleven to 7-Eleven to get as many things of Skoal as I could, and I would head back to Arrowhead. For 6 months, I slept in Arrowhead Stadium. I had a blow-up twin mattress and slept there because I wanted to be the first face that Herm Edwards saw every day that he walked in at 4:15. And my only hope was that if I could just hold out for an entire season, I would have a chance to make it. So at the end of the season, we went 4-12. And you mathematicians will also know this is not a good record. And there's this phenomenon called Black Monday in the NFL. This is not to be confused with Black Friday, which is a day when you can get great deals on electronics. Black Monday in the NFL is the Monday after the last game of the regular season, and this is the day when coaches get fired. And so I watched these coaches walk into Herm Edwards' office, walk out, and they have a short amount of time to get all their belongings and exit the building. So his secretary comes to my office, which was really a converted closet. We had torn the door off the hinges. So she knocks on the frame and she says, "Coach Edwards would like to see you." I'm walking into his office and I'm thinking to myself, well, technically I can't get fired. Listen, if you were to Google Daron Roberts and Kansas City Chiefs in 2007, absolutely nothing would come up. I had to sneak into the team picture, all right? I had to sneak on the planes. I got kicked off of one. For all intents and purposes, I was not there. And so I walk into his office and I sit down and Coach Edwards says, "We really appreciate your contributions." Oh, why did you? That is the death blow. So I'm just bracing and I'm thinking to myself, this is not gonna go over well in Mount Pleasant, Texas, that I got fired from an internship. And I hear the sound of a piece of paper slide across his desk. And I look up and I see the NFL shield. And Coach Edwards says, "Welcome to the National Football League. This is your first coaching contract." Now listen, 3 years of law school, I took out that Pilot V5 Precise pen. I saw something that resembled my name and a line. And I could have started a fire in Arrowhead Stadium. I mean, I scribbled my signature so fast. He's like, "Hold on. Hey, son, hold on. Don't you want to review the terms?" I said, No. You take this. This is for you. Execute that as soon as humanly possible. That's how I got my start in the league. I spent 7 years. I coached with the Lions and coached in West Virginia and with the Cleveland Browns. And then returned to the University of Texas because after getting fired from the Browns, my son walked up to me and I was scrambling eggs. And he said, "You eat breakfast?" He was 3 at the time. I'm like, "Yes, Dylan." He walks away. Comes back. "You eat breakfast?" So I turned to my wife and I said, "Hey, Hillary, we're spending a lot of money on this private school that we're sending Dylan to. And I don't know if it's too late to get a refund, but we have our receipts. What's wrong with him?" And Hillary, being Hillary, turns to me and says, "Tell me the last time that you had breakfast with Dylan." And so smirk turns to silence, and I realize that I can't even think of the last time that I had had breakfast with my son. And the cruel irony was this: I had spent the majority of 7 years with other people's sons, and my own son did not know me. So I get to the University of Texas and I'm teaching classes, and the first question I ask students, and I've taught over 1,000 students here at the University of Texas, the first question I ask is, "What is holding you back?" And so undergrads, being undergrads, they have clarifying questions and they want to know if it's graded. And I say, listen, just write the response down. And I've collected these responses, and what would you guess is the word that keeps percolating to the surface? It's good, you can read, fear. Fear. And as you start to unpack the responses, it's not just fear, but it's a fear of taking risks and a fear of rejection. Now, Bronnie Ware was a hospice provider, and she asked people, men and women on their deathbeds, what was their major regret, right? What were some of their major regrets? And this one response keeps coming over and over and over back up in her work. "I wish I had the courage to live a life true to myself." Now, in ancient times, the Egyptians would write a question on papyrus if they were considering a risk or a big decision. And they would go to the oracle and they would slide this request underneath the door, and they would wait for some response. Perhaps it was a raven flying from above, all right? Today we have Instagram stories and the poll. We poll people. We ask, hey, should we go and join this startup? Hey, should we leave our jobs? And it's very difficult for people to understand and to figure out at what point they should jump. And this is the reason why. It's IKEA. It's IKEA's fault. Economists have determined that there's this phenomenon called the IKEA effect. Now, we've all been to IKEA, and you walk in and there are these pristine desks and the light is flowing oh so gently along the oak or the faux oak. And you see this desk and you start to imagine it in your apartment, and so you buy it. And they throw that box on top of your Prius and you head home. And then you realize that you don't have any screwdrivers, you don't know what a mallet is, and you start building this thing. And what you have at the end sort of resembles a desk. It's wobbly. One of the drawers won't quite pull out. But here's the thing. You've spent so much time building this thing that it's yours and you keep it. And this IKEA effect is really the new age notion of sunk cost. So what we're finding in the research is that many people are willing or unwilling to change their circumstance or take a risk because they've built so much time building their status quo. And they don't want to even think outside the box. They want to continue to live as they are. So I've done a cruel thing, and I have a research team here at the University of Texas. We have started to introduce strains of rejection to students in my class. So for example, one of my assignments is a rejection challenge. So in pairs, I send students out and they have to go and ask a barista at a Starbucks for a free drink. So you have one partner is videotaping this episode, okay? And it's great. You should watch the footage. I mean, the person videotaping the one who's going for the rejection, her hand's shaking. She's nervous, okay? And we asked them beforehand, hey, listen, how likely do you think you ought to take risk in life? And then we asked them the same question afterwards. And what we're finding is this: the more that we are exposing people to rejection, the more likely it is that they are willing to take a chance in the future. And here's the reason why. This is my theory, is that we build up so much anxiety over the decision to make the plunge. And once we survive it, we look back and we say, that wasn't so bad. Here's another assignment. This is something you can do at home, but you won't because you're afraid. It's the rejection resume. So I want you to take that pristine resume that you have. Under education, I want you to list all of the schools that you didn't get into. Every single one. Under work experience, list every job you didn't get. List every internship you were turned away from. Under honors and awards, the same. Every distinction that you did not get. And here's what I tell you will happen if you sit down by yourself and look back over this list of rejections. You will start to realize that at the time they seemed like something you would never be able to overcome. But now you look back and you'll say, I can weather that storm. And perhaps I have the courage to move on to the next risk. So I'm imploring you not to think outside of the box. I'm begging you to burn the whole damn thing altogether. Go out there and get rejected. Thank you.